Caleb Fairley. Can a game kill? Caleb Fairley, a man obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons, murdered a woman and her daughter in cold blood. At the time, prosecutors and the media tied the homicide to the game, suggesting that Fairley had been radicalized. But how could one young man be driven to murder by a game? Caleb Fairley's case was not the first time Dungeons and Dragons was associated with violent crime. In 1984, Steve and Dan Irwin, aged 12 and 15, died in a murder-suicide pact. They left behind a note saying it was the only way they could escape the game. In 1987, Daniel Caston murdered his parents in a brutal attack. Afterwards, he told the authorities that his Dungeons and Dragons character, called Mind Flayer, told him to do it. Two other cases, one in 1979 and one in 1982, involved kids committing suicide with the game getting the blame. This led to the establishment of BAD, or Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons. BAD was a group which aimed to raise public awareness about the dangers of the role-playing game. The supernatural elements, they said, included devil worship, human sacrifice, and satanic rituals. The group was so popular that they landed slots on 60 Minutes to raise awareness. Even though millions of people were playing the game without murdering people, Dungeons and Dragons developed a bad reputation. By the mid-1990s, much of the hysteria had died down, but there was still a latent mistrust of the game. BAD had sullied the reputation in many people's minds for years to come. If the public already associated Dungeons and Dragons with dark magic, that might explain why Caleb Fairley played. Caleb was something of a wayward young man. He came from a fairly affluent family. Heavy set with a thick blonde mullet, Caleb was not exactly raised in his parents' image. His parents owned a children's clothing store called Your Kids and Mine, situated in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. Caleb didn't look like the typical employee for a kids' clothing store, but he worked there anyways. He ran the store when his parents were away. He liked industrial metal music, role-playing games, and he had an obsession with pornography and vampire lore. His own choice of clothing was somewhat far from the mainstream. One of his sweaters bore an image with a vampire attacking a young woman. When his parents weren't around, Caleb drilled peepholes in the dressing room walls. But to most people, Caleb Fairley was just a weird guy, one of millions of people who shared his interests, but seemingly harmless. In September 1995, Lisa Mandrake, an almost 30-year-old woman, entered Your Kids and Mine. She had her daughter in tow, a 19-month-old girl called Devon. Together with her husband, Jimmy, she ran a janitorial service and volunteered for Meals on Wheels. It was late in the day and Caleb was the only person working. He had been thinking about closing up when Lisa walked in. Lisa and her daughters were the only two customers in the store. Immediately, Lisa looked familiar to Caleb. Her dark hair and fair skin reminded him of someone. She looked just like the woman being attacked by the vampire on the image on his sweatshirt. Caleb locked the store, sealing Lisa and Devon inside. With Lisa and Devon locked inside, Caleb struck. He moved across to Lisa and attempted to grope her. Lisa resisted, which only angered Caleb. He strangled both his thick hands, wrapping around their thin necks and cutting off any cries for help. Once both victims were dead, Caleb allegedly sexually assaulted Lisa's body. Then he dumped the bodies, leaving young Tavon's corpse in Valley Forge National Park and leaving Lisa's body in a wooded area near a health club. With both bodies disposed of, Caleb went home, got dressed, and went to an Electric Hellfire Club concert. But it wasn't long before the crime was discovered. Jimmy, Lisa's husband, had been at home watching football. Lisa had told him exactly where she was going, right down to the store name. When she never returned home, he told the police exactly where to look. The police found Lisa's car parked outside the store, and when they searched inside Your Kids and Mine, they found Caleb's pornography stash. It was stained with blood. They found long strands of black hair, an exact match for Lisa. They found a saliva stain on the floor, more of Lisa's hair on the vacuum, and they found the drilled holes in the dressing rooms. 2 days later, Fairley was charged with the murders. When the police dragged Fairley in for questioning, they noticed a thick layer of makeup on his face. The detectives told him to wipe it off. When the makeup was removed, Fairley's face was covered in scratch marks. He pleaded innocence, claiming that they were sustained at the concert. But this contradicted what Fairley had told his own friends, to whom he had claimed the scratches were sustained when he helped an assault victim outside his store. Fairley had even asked his friends to lie for him. They refused. When police searched his home, they found another stash of pornography, as well as all of the board games, vampire memorabilia, and various occult paraphernalia. One district attorney described Fairley as a real pervert into all kinds of sexual devices and various perverted stuff. 2 hikers found Tavon's body a few days after the murder. The police worked out a deal with Caleb Fairley, tell them the location of Lisa's body, and they would not pursue the death penalty. Caleb agreed. Investigators found DNA under Lisa's fingernails, matching them to the scratches on Caleb's face. Along with the other evidence, it was enough to secure a conviction for 2 counts of murder, as well as other charges including abuse of a corpse. The media ran wild with the story. The beautiful young mother and her child murdered by a Dungeons and Dragons obsessed outsider. TV news front page lines and talk radio ran with the scandalous nature of the crime. They restructured the theory linking Dungeons and Dragons with Satanism and the occult. It was bad all over again. After a short investigation and a short trial, Caleb was handed the maximum sentence, 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. He is still behind bars today, incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution, Fayette, in LaBelle, Pennsylvania. All of his appeals have failed. Caleb Fairley will go down in history as the vicious murder of an innocent mother and daughter. How much he was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, however, remains in the eye of the beholder.
Hello everyone, this is Ria Matus and thank you for watching Broadcasting. If you like what you just saw, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon next to it so that you know when I post a video next. Please like the video and leave your comments below. So until next time friends.